Hey everybody, Aaron Bishop here with the Bishop's Blurb. In Leviticus 23, we encounter a list of festivals that Israel is supposed to keep. In this chapter, there are 7 yearly festivals and 1 weekly festival, and this makes for a total of 8 listed festivals in the course of the chapter. But there's something interesting that occurs in the very center of this chapter. Between the last festival of the spring, Shavuot, Pentecost, Feast of Weeks, it's given several names, and the first festival of the fall, being Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets or Blasts, also called Rosh Hashanah, we find this verse, Leviticus 23, verse 22. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. A verse about how to reap fields and leave the edges behind for those who are less fortunate? What does this have to do with the holidays that are listed here? Well, when you dig into these festivals, you discover that they are all in some way connected to the harvest cycle. During the festival of unleavened bread in the spring comes a day on which the first fruits offering was to be made. We read of this offering in Leviticus 23 verses 10 through 11. They speak of this offering, and it has become known in some circles as the Day of First Fruits, even though this day isn't technically a holiday on its own. And it says, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord so that you may be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it." And then about 10 verses later, when it's talking about Pentecost, Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, we read of the first fruits yet again. Verse 20, "And the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before the Lord. With the 2 lambs they shall be holy to the Lord for the priests." All of the spring holidays seem to be associated with first fruits in some way. And as we dig in deeper into the harvest cycle, we find that the first fruits of the barley occurred in the spring during the festival of unleavened bread, or matzah. And then the first fruit of the wheat, or the wheat harvest, would occur around the festival of Shavuot, or Pentecost. The fall festivals then, they all happen after the fall harvest, and each of these festivals were a time for communal celebration when all of the crops were finally in. Now this all makes more sense when you discover that 3 of these festivals are called Chag, or pilgrimage festivals: Passover, Pentecost, and Sukkot, or tabernacles. And that at these festivals, these pilgrimage festivals, all the men were to gather together in one central location, whether that be the tabernacle or the temple. They were to gather in the place where God made his name known. And at this time, first fruit offerings were to be made for all of the crops. And so taking first fruits was made logistically a whole lot easier by bringing them with you as you went to Jerusalem or wherever the tabernacle was to celebrate. So when the festivals times came along in the land of Israel, harvest was always on their mind. But in the grand equation of harvest and festivals, who is it that loses out? It's the poor and the sojourner, the people who didn't have any land. This verse that seems completely out of place reminds us that everyone was to be able to partake in the harvest, and that they were also to have the opportunity to celebrate. This verse that seems completely out of place reminds us that everyone was to be able to partake in the harvest, whether they had money or land or not. All were to be taken care of, and all were to have the opportunity to celebrate the harvest, rather than some looking in from the outside in envy or hatred, as everyone else celebrated, but they were left outside starving. This one small verse reminds us that everyone in the kingdom of God is important. Everyone is to have the opportunity to harvest, and all are to be included in these times of celebration. No one in the community of God should be left on the outside looking in on everyone else celebrating while they are doing without. This is the heart of the Torah, this is the heart of the festivals, and this is the heart of God. All should be cared for in God's kingdom.